Okay, hey, Jon Gorham.
Jose, how are you doing?
How you been, buddy?
I've been great, great. How about yourself?
Uh, I've been really busy lately, just because it's that time of the year when, as a part timer,
Hmm.
and we're gonna be talking about all kinds of stuff about part timers today. But this is where you like start catching up on all the chores that you've
Right.
put off. Doing your taxes, and in my case, getting my number card plasticized and all of
That's
those
a
things
big
that.
one right now. Yeah.
Oh, you haven't done yours either?
I did. I had to do everything online and I've been putting it off for so long and I finally got around to it.
So here we are. I'm doing all this stuff and I'm running around doing that. Finished my syllabuses yesterday. So I'm finally, I think, moving into vacation mode. But welcome to OTJ. And
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate that.
I've been
I think this
looking
is my
forward to this
second time,
conversation.
second or third time.
I think so. At least I know of two. This one and the one before with David, when you guys were talking about finances and stuff.
Right, right. With Ben Sharon, right.
You're a man of many talents.
No, no, no.
Yeah, you are. I think a lot of people look up to you, even at work, because you're one of the coordinators for your university for part-time teachers. And that's what we're probably going to be talking a lot about today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What it takes to get hired for uni work. But tell me about yourself first, though. Like, how did you get into uni teaching? Were you a uni teacher immediately as soon as you came to Japan?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't come out of my bachelor's program and say like I want to move to Japan and become a university teacher. It was not on my radar at all. And so I moved from the States. I want to say it was right about the beginning of like the whole Lehman crash, like the big
Ooh.
financial meltdown in 2007, 2008, right around there. So I came over to Japan to work. Of course, I'm sure you've heard this story before for 1 year.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yes, one of those people. So I was like, yeah, I would love to try it out. I came over to visit when I was, I want to say my junior year in college, and I visited Nagoya. I loved it. I went out snowboarding and everything like that up in Nagano. It was a great time. So I always wanted to come back to Japan. That was my thing. And so I was presented with an opportunity to come back and work at an eikaiwa, private eikaiwa in Tokyo. And I was like, wow, that'd be such a cool opportunity. I'll just do it for a year, see how it is. And then my boss at the time, the manager of the eikaiwa, she asked me to come back for another year. And then I was like, okay, all right, I could see myself living here for the second year. And my parents like, are you sure you want to do
Just two,
this? And
just two.
brother, yeah, right. So I went ahead and did it for a second year. And that's when, of course, you start to make new friends and you start looking around, finding out what other people are doing at different jobs and things like that. And so that led me into a part-time teaching gig at a private high school, private junior high school and high school in Tokyo. And I owe a lot to my brother. He was the one that hooked me up with the job initially. And so that led me into talking about like, okay, well, I can make at least a decent living working at a junior high school or a high school. And from there, I was like, well, how is it that you could get into? I saw a lot of these private schools, these private high schools are connected to universities.
Mm.
And so I was looking, I would always see these other teachers getting off because I'd ride a school bus from the train station. I'd ride a school bus and I'd always see these other teachers walking the opposite direction. And they're not wearing suits. They were kind of dressed down, wearing sweatshirts and
During
jeans and
this.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I want to do that. Like that's kind of cool. So it was literally riding on the bus and talking to some of these teachers and just getting to know people. And they're like, oh yeah, well, you got to get this done, you got to get that done, and once you get that done, I'll help you out with introducing you to the right person. And so of course that first thing, I don't know if you want to get into this talk right away, but
Take your time. We got the whole night. Well, not the
okay.
whole night, but a good part of the night.
All right. Yeah, yeah. So it was literally riding on the school bus from the station to the school or vice versa, and getting to know some of the teachers. And one of them happened to be the coordinator at one of my universities, and he was super nice, and he said, once you get your master's degree, get into a program, uh, give me a call, and like gave me his card. So I was like, all right, that's awesome, cool. So I started thinking about master's degrees. So of course, the first thing you do is you Google master's degree in Japan, and Jose, you might know that the programs in Japan, they're not really cheap. And
Yeah.
so,
Nothing is cheap in this country, but especially master's programs. Yeah.
right. So there's a few of them. I think Waseda has some, and gosh, there's
Temple,
another. Sorry.
Temple, I
Yeah,
think
Temple, that's the other big one.
famous. A bunch. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, so I started just kind of looking around, and I was like, oh gosh, it's a pretty big price tag. So I wasn't too sure about that. I was kind of like, all right, is this really something that I want to do, or should I go back to the States and, try and pursue something else? And so I was like, there's got to be an easier way. There has to be an easier way. Like, is there an online program? So I started, digging deeper. Really went down that rabbit hole, and tried to find something that I was interested in, because I think that a lot of the programs were offering something like TESOL is a big one, like the teaching English as a second language. Those are really big ones, but it's not something that I wanted to spend a huge amount of time on. But I'm really interested in technology, and educational technology, to be specific. So I found a program that was completely online, that was accredited, and it was for educate as a master's degree in education for educational technology. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And it was totally affordable. And it was something that I knew that I could graduate with a degree and not be in debt, which is like, wow,
That's
sign me
very
up.
important. Yes.
Yeah. And I say that because as an American, I graduated from my with a bachelor's degree with an enormous amount of student loan debt.
It was just an
And
amazing thing to me,
so you grew up in Canada. I don't know if that's a common thing in Canada to pay a huge amount of money.
When I graduated, I was paying something like $800 a year for tuition.
Wow.
And
I'm
I would
jealous.
pay something like, I don't know, if it was a lot of money that year, $300 for books. So in terms of school, you could get away with it in about $1,200, $1,500 a year. I mean, you had
Wow.
apartment and you had food and all of that, but that's not important. In terms of the school, digging out cash from your pockets, $1,200, $1,500 a year. So you can basically, if you work hard and you get a maybe small loan, you don't walk out with debt. You walk out with a degree. But the way I've been hearing it now, it's like if you walk out of a science major, even, you're about $20,000 in debt. If you walk out with a medical degree, $50,000 in debt, a law degree, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And
Yeah.
what?
Well, that's kind of, it's the norm. And there are other ways. And it's, in hindsight, it's like I could have gone to a community college for 2 years and then gotten into a state school, which would have cost a lot less. And I didn't do that route. I went to a private Catholic university. I was like, okay, I want to be in the city and all this stuff. And it was a very expensive school. I got a scholarship, well, not a full scholarship, but it was a little bit. And if I didn't have that, it would have been, at the time, about $45,000 a year.
Wow.
And it's gone up. Now it's about $60,000 a year without grants. Yeah, for 1 year. So it's like, it's insane how much it costs to go to university in the States.
I don't want to get into that conversation, but what intrigues me is this idea that you actually found an affordable master's program in EdTech. So what's the school, or what's what's the name of the school? What's the name of the program in the school if people want to have it for reference sake?
Sure. Well, I'll actually drop it in the chat here. I don't know if that's,
and I'll move it on to the Facebook chat as well.
Okay, good. Well, I went to, after doing some research here, I found American College of Education, And at first I'm like, okay, this can't be right. It was at the time it was like $7,000 for the degree.
Whoa.
So I was like, oh, this has to be fake. It can't be real.
Right.
And so one thing that you have to do when you're looking for these online master's degrees is it accredited? That's huge right there. Yeah. So here's the master's in educational technology. It's gone up. It looks like it's gone up to about 9,500.
Still, you know,
yeah.
could be worse.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Could be a lot worse. And that's the whole deal, right? That's the entire
Right.
package.
Right.
So that is still affordable, relatively affordable.
Mhm.
Right.
And so the biggest thing was finding out, okay, is this place accredited? And of course it is accredited by, I wish I had the name. It's definitely on the website.
Okay.
By the Higher Education Learning Community. I wish I could think of it right now.
It's accredited right now.
Yes, and you can find out that it's accredited by like Big Ten schools as well. It's like huge universities, like Purdue University, same thing. So I was like, okay, cool. So it's legit. And I actually it was a great experience, by the way. I had some of my teachers were awesome, learned a ton of good stuff. And it was at my own pace. Like I didn't have to attend any classes or anything like that. So it was very nice. And there are other options as well. And I should probably throw this one in here that I'll put this one up if anyone else is interested. And I did not go here, but I think it's Western Governors University. And this is an interesting one, Jose, because I think what you do is you pay by the term, and whatever the cost is per semester, I guess, you can take as many courses as you want. So if you really are dedicated, I think you could get done with your master's degree in like a year, if you want to just hammer it out. And so that's a possibility as well, right there. And it's definitely an accredited school.
What's the cost of WGU? Do you have a range? Is it
you'd have to look into it. I know it's fairly inexpensive, but I think that, like I said, you pay by the semester. And then you take, once you pay that semester, you can take, I think, like 2 or 3, 4 courses, 5 courses, whatever you can handle. So as long as you can handle all those courses and pass them, you can take as many as you want. And so so that's another, there's many different options out there. And there's also my brother, for example, who also lives in Japan. He took a totally different route. He went to the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And as you can guess, that was not cheap.
No.
So when I asked him, I think it was in total about $80,000.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
So
probably around $30,000-$40,000 a year. Yeah.
But that's what he wanted. He wanted to go for that, like the top level. That's something that, you know, it looks great on a resume. I went for something that's accredited, that checks the box of having a master's degree. And yeah, go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Please go on.
Oh, no. So I was just going to mention that you can go for the lowest cost, but make sure it's accredited, or you can go for something that is very high level. That's going to cost you a lot of money, but it's going to look great on your resume. But as far as getting into a university, that's going to be the first thing that you'll need, is that master's degree. Now, I do believe there are some universities that will allow you to work there without a master's degree. But for the most part, and I'll put up some of the job sites where we post our openings, they say master's degree in the field of education. So I'd say like maybe 95% of them. So it's one of those things, like if you're going to get into it, you might want to get your master's degree, and I would recommend doing it online. Because it's something you don't have to leave Japan. You can do it right from your own home.
Great advice. One thing I wanted to ask, as you sit on hiring committees and such, if someone was in the middle of a master's program, so when you say that, well, if you can handle X number of classes over a semester, then you're talking about somebody who's trying to do this over at least a year and a half, maybe a couple of years. And if somebody were to come up to you and said, well, I don't have my master's degree yet, but I'm X number of modules, X number of credits away from it. Is that something that you, as someone who hires workers, can go, well, close enough. We'll give you the position because everything else seems okay. Or does someone actually have to finish, has to have the sheepskin to put down on the table to show you?
Usually, you'll have to have that, that piece of paper in hand by April 1st or whenever the start date is.
Okay, so you could be hired by October as long as
Yeah.
you tell them, but I'll have it by April.
Yeah. So that's generally the case. It's usually, I think, for most of the people, they've already got the master's degree in hand. But I suppose if that were the case, like I will definitely, this is my graduation date, which is going to be March 31st, April 1st, no problem. Yeah. So
I got a master's
that would
degree.
work. Now, it's interesting that you asked that, Jose, because the school that I work at, we've actually turned away candidates who were in a PhD program. And these are people that I know, that I've worked with. And I'm like, no, they're great teachers. I know for a fact they're going to be awesome here. And it's not my decision, but it's the school policy.
Right.
And I think I've heard this happens a lot for people that are in a PhD program. They get turned down just because they don't have a PhD, by the time that they are applying. So I don't really have a straightforward answer on why some universities do that. But yeah, we've definitely turned away like really good, high quality candidates in the past based on that.
Isn't
But
that? No, go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to say that saying that you're in the process of getting your degree might hinder your chances of getting hired. Whereas if you say, I'm done, here it is, like, boom, you'll probably get through the doors and get the interview.
But if you literally are not finished the program, you can't purvey a falsehood and say, oh, I got it.
True.
It's in the mail. You can't say that.
Absolutely.
Either, right?
Yeah, you don't want to lie about it. That's true.
Yeah, because then that's it.
absolutely.
Like when you're discovered, that's it, right?
Yeah, you don't want to do that. So I did, the person that I talked to originally when I said that I was riding on the school bus, and this person was the one of the directors of the program. And I asked him the same question. I was like, well, there's already an opening. Like, I want to apply for this job. And he's like, are you finished? And I was like, no, I'll be finished in, I think it was March at the time. It was like 2015. He's like, get the degree, give me a call. Okay. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll just wait on it. So yeah, I just waited until I was done. And as soon as I had the degree, it was like, boom, here you go. I have it, I'm ready to go. And literally within a week I had an interview. And it was, I'll go into more detail about it, but I think networking with people and talking to people and letting them know what you're up to, what you're interested in, where you want to work, things like that. It's incredibly important to know where you want to work and know people that are in the position to hire you as well.
Yeah, that's no, I can't agree more. I think yeah, well, we'll talk about that because we want to talk about networking and stuff. Just a final point on something that you brought up about PhDs, and the reason why I ask, or at least why I'm so interested in the idea of sort of being part way through your master's, is that as you mentioned, there are some schools that will hire just people with a basic undergraduate degree, just a BA, because that's me. I've never had a master's degree. I make it very clear to anyone who wants to interview me. I just want to make it clear so that when there's no mistake, I don't have a master's degree. And in some cases around here in Fukuoka, or perhaps in smaller prefectures, but not outside of towns like Nagoya or Osaka or Tokyo, where the competition is much stiffer, and with the congregation of population makes it easier for even the high number of universities in Tokyo to just basically pick out the PhDs. There's enough PhDs floating around Tokyo that, and I also think that the reason why they're so stuck on the idea of getting PhDs, isn't that a government sort of demand? That you guys have to start stacking your decks with PhDs, no more of these, basic. master's degree people, you can get a PhD, right?
Well, to be a part-time lecturer, at least for now, and I want to say at least in Tokyo, I don't know about in Fukuoka, at least up here in Tokyo, it's one of those things that maybe it's to just kind of weed out candidates, because I believe to get a job at like most Eikaiwas, you got to have your bachelor's.
Right.
So it's one of those like extra steps. Is someone really dedicated enough to come and work at a certain university? Now, as far as PhDs are concerned, I'm not exactly sure about what the Ministry of Education is really wanting to do, but I know it's pretty rare. If you want to get like a full-time like faculty, if you want to be on the faculty, it's pretty rare to be a faculty member without a PhD or without at least an EdD. So, and I should be perfectly upfront about this and clear about this. I've got my master's degree, and I'm a specially appointed assistant professor. So I'm about as low on the totem pole as you can get.
Oh, dear.
But I do work with the full-time faculty members as well. So I kind of get to see, I'm barely above the part-time lecturers, but I'm not a full-time faculty member. So I get to see a pretty wide range of how things work behind the scenes. And you know, it's one of those things like, if you really wanted to get into a PhD program, you should probably talk to my brother, who is, you know, he's in one, he's about to finish it. And he's like, I shouldn't talk about him, but
oh dear,
he's not a big fan of it, basically. He wants to get it over with. He's just ready to get it done.
Very diplomatic. Well, very well said. And again, in Fukuoka, the contrast is that I know plenty of non-PhDs who are proper faculty.
Okay.
They're Junkyoju or Jokyoju, whatever that particular university wants to use in its terminology for assistant professor or associate professor. Yeah, they're proper faculty. They're full-time. Some of them are tenured. However, that's changing too now, as the ministry tries to sort of level out everything and not just apply it to Tokyo, but to ask, I think, a lot of universities to start putting more PhDs on their staff. But the people who are already grandfathered in are not necessarily going to get kicked out. But even in a place like Fukuoka, people who were lucky like me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, who didn't have an MA, but you know, good enough for part-time work kind of thing, that market is starting to dry up. And what your advice is becoming much more relevant, I think.
Right. So I mean, I guess, Jose, I would almost say, at least for you, if you're wanting to get into universities up in Osaka or in Tokyo, I would almost recommend doing like the route of the Western Governors State. I think it's called Western Governors
University. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tempting, but there's another sort of overriding factor. And I don't want to make this about me, but I'm old. I'm 61, John. And to go into a program that finishes when I'm 63, when most of the time universities will not look at me anymore, 2 years after that, got to balance that out. But that's neither here nor there. Most people watching this will not be my age. But tell me what else.
I must say you look incredibly young for 61. I never would have guessed that.
Well, thank you very much. I only said that just so I could I was fishing for compliments. Thank you. You gave me the right compliment. What else makes someone an ideal hiring candidate? What about publications? What about time spent in Japan, Japanese language skill?
Sure. So you mentioned a bunch of things here, but I should say, so if we were to check these boxes here, the first one, like I said, was get your master's degree. The second one is to get published. Now, you might be thinking like, oh my God, this is going to take forever. It's going to, you know, I'm not sure where to start. There's an incredibly good organization that's called OTJ.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Has over 3,000 teachers who live in Japan. I think most of them live in Japan. And you could throw a question out there and say, hey, does anybody know any publications or any place that's accepting submissions? And you'll probably get some really good feedback right off the bat. Now, if you don't go that route, you could also look at places like JALT, the Japan Association of Language Teachers. JACET, JACET. That's another one.
Mhm.
Focus exclusively on teaching in colleges and universities. And getting your, well, as you're working through your master's program, you could be trying to publish at the same time, so you can kill these, two birds with one stone. And so if you were to join Jolt, for example, you can become a member, and you could not only get published, but you could also go to some of the Jolt conferences, and then you could start your networking. So you could be in a master's program, you could try and publish, and then you can also start networking with other people who are teaching at colleges and universities around Japan. And you can also, another really good thing to do is to have your CV, your resume or your CV updated at all times.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have my Word doc that's open, and as soon as I close out this Zoom session, I update my CV
Ping,
with,
yeah.
with this one right here. So I always keep a huge list of all the times that I've given a presentation, any kind of faculty development, whatever it might be. If you got up and you stood up and talked to people about something that you're doing, that counts as, in my opinion, that counts as something that that should go on your CV.
Absolutely. Just very
So,
quickly to explain the share that I threw up there for people
okay.
who may not know, Jolt sponsors a monthly session called ZPD. Americans will say ZPD, but that's okay. Called ZPD, and it's a Zoom professional development where it's basically a networking session. And especially if you're an ALT looking to get into university work, the sort of people that might be watching this particular OTJtv episode, Jolt will provide that time to tell you, well, if you're interested in publications, we'll send you into this breakout room and you can ask all the questions you want. Of these people know a lot about that. If you want to know more about this or more about this aspect of things, that's what the ZPD is all about, and it's something that Jolt does. And if you just go to, if you look basically for Jolt ZPD in Facebook, you'll probably find a whole list of the events that they've sponsored before. They do it once a month, usually around the end of the month, like this one, and that's a good place to network, as John was saying.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great place to start right there. Thanks, Jose.
No
Yeah,
problem.
so those are, I would say, like the three big ones here. So master's degree, publications, and then also speaking at conferences. And again, talking about threes, it really helps to have 3 publications, also 3 conferences that you've given presentations at, as well as your master's degree. So I shouldn't say that it has to be 3, by the way. There are some places that will say, well, 1 is acceptable. 1 publication could be potentially acceptable. However, if you're trying to cast the net out and you want to get as many jobs as possible, 3 is going to check that box. Okay. So that's really important to have that. And I mentioned this earlier, talk to people, like get on OTJ and say, hey, I'm interested in this. This is the program I'm in. Does anybody know about places that are hiring? And there's even a place on OTJ. I believe there's a section specifically for hiring on OTJ. And then you could even start to DM people and say like, hey, can I talk with you? Like, it's and I should also mention that the person that I originally found out about working in a university from, he still is my mentor. I would consider him a mentor. I could go to him and I can ask him any kind of questions about what's going on with the program, where he thinks things are going with it over the next couple of years. So finding a mentor is incredibly important as well. Someone that you can kind of look up to and they can guide you on your way towards getting into whatever university you're interested in.
Now, let's say you've got that package ready. You're ready. Okay, I'm going to start cold calling. Oh, I've already got a couple of connections. And here comes interview day. Is there anything like you would give as advice to the young men, young women out there who are about to go into the first interview to do university work? Well, apart from the basic stuff like, well, be yourself, have confidence, take in some mouthwash and make sure you comb your hair. Apart from that, sort of basic advice. What is it that you, when you do hiring, that you notice that like, gee, I wish, I don't know why people don't know that, but that's something that I always find is a very common sort of problem that people make, and it keeps them from getting really seriously taken in an interview.
Sure, absolutely. Now we're assuming that everyone's gotten through that. You've gotten through not even the algorithm, but we'll get a stack of our CVs,
Right.
and then those CVs will get ranked. So we'll get those ranked, and then from those CVs we'll say, okay, let's interview these people. Okay, so we can talk about things that you want to put on your resume.
Actually, why don't we
later?
I mean, that's that, or we could do that now, because that's actually it's a
Okay.
more logical order. What do you look for in a resume?
Sure. So I don't know if it's legal in the States or in Canada, but one of the things that people really want, that the director of my program really wants, is a picture. And it's one of those pictures where, you can go, I think they're called like key day boxes. There are these little photo booths that they're at most stations, most train stations. Put on a dark suit, put on a tie. If you're a woman, put on a nice dark business suit, and make sure that you're looking straight forward. You can smile, it's okay, but have a like a headshot, basically the same thing that you'd use for your passport, and put that onto the top corner. So I'm the person who in the background. So the director of my program, has this stack of all the CVs that come in. They say, oh, this looks like a good person. And that's the first thing, is the first thing you're going to see is that person's face. Put on your nationality. On me personally, I put on where I live, my visa status as well.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So they know that, okay, you're qualified to work here. You can actually work for at least for the entire year. And then one thing I should mention is that one time I did see, this is not at my current university, but when I owned an eikaiwa, and I had to do hiring for an eikaiwa, someone put in, I don't know if you know the comedy show Seinfeld. Someone had like a Seinfeld kind of avatar logo and everything like that, and it was like, I did this in episode 1 and everything like that. It's like, okay, I get it for an eikaiwa. Yeah, I get it for like an eikaiwa. It's kind of funny. I would probably personally, I'd want to interview that person for an eikaiwa, but if you have to make the recruiter jump an extra step to try and figure out what exactly you're about, it's just not going to work. So be very, like, your CV is there to just say, this is who I am. This is, how long I've lived here. Here's my education. Here are my publications. Here are my conference proceedings. And just make it very dry, because you want to be able to say, this person checks the boxes that we're looking for. Yeah. And then you can get into that. Your CV is going to get shuffled over to the next pile. Like, okay, now from these ones that actually check the boxes, who should we interview? Who do you think we should interview?
And academics, or academia itself, is such a conservative, dry sort of environment. I mean, you just have to look at the writing to see just how dry and conservative it is. Maybe if you're trying to be hired for a funky new startup, that'll work. But for academia, a Seinfeld themed. Oh, I also wanted to ask.
Well, that was an eikaiwa, by the way. But...
I understand. But and I'm sure that particular person knew well enough that academia is a different world. But I also wanted to ask. We got something from Glenn. I'll get to your question in just a second, Glenn. The relevance of keeping your resume both in English and in Japanese. So when you're going to get hired in university as an English teacher, is it worth the effort? I have an idea about what you're going to say, but is it worth the effort to maintain your Japanese version of your resume as well too?
It is, but it's for a part-time position. It's not completely necessary, because they're looking for someone who, and I'm assuming that everyone's applying for an English as a foreign language teaching position. you're not required to teach in, you're not even wanted to, they don't want you to speak in Japanese for most of these places. So it's not, it's not necessary for these part-time positions here. But if you get into the, actually you want to be on the faculty, then there's a certain process that you'll go through, and it's a very long drawn out resume or CV that you've got to set up that is in Japanese. So Jose, I would say it's probably worth it to go ahead and get that done. But it's not, I wouldn't say that I've ever said to someone who is applying for a job at my university, like, oh, let me see your Japanese CV, like, and make sure, because you don't want them speaking to your students in Japanese for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So and then to kind of move on here as well with let's say that you've gotten through that the to the second pile, and now we're saying, okay, these are the people that we actually want to interview. So after, well, a lot of these interviews have been on Zoom because of the the pandemic. It's like we couldn't really meet in person. But I would have to say, Jose, that the very first thing that I look for is someone's got a smartphone. If they're sitting there and they're checking their smartphone, they're sitting in the waiting room. So, and they're just kind of checking their smartphone. They're messaging people, line messaging people. I would say just put the smartphone, like turn it off, put it in your pocket, put it in your briefcase, whatever you need to do. Sit there quietly. And when people come in, say, like, have a smile on your face. Even if you're wearing a mask, you can tell if somebody's smiling.
Yes, you can.
You can see it or hear the smile in their voice. So that's incredibly important. And to be friendly towards people is so incredibly important as well. And then also to have like a pen and a piece of paper, jot down people's names. If they say whatever it is, Tanaka, like, okay, Tanaka introduced me at the door, whoever that might have been, write those people's names on, even if it's someone who's just opening the door for you to set you into the waiting room. That person could potentially be the person who is trying to hire you as well. They might have a say in this as well. You don't know. So be as formal, business-like as possible from the moment you set foot onto that university campus. Or if it's a Zoom class or if it's a Zoom room, make sure that you have your business suit on and everything like that. And your kids aren't breaking through the door. But everybody at the meeting likely will have a say. So it's incredibly important to be as cordial as possible, have a friendly smile on your face, and take down names. And as you're leaving, say everybody's, if you can, say everybody's name and thank them for coming and everything like that. Totally important here. You might be, especially if it's your first ever, if it's your first ever interview, you might be incredibly nervous, but do your best to relax. That's the best I can say, because when I got hired for my position as an assistant professor, I asked the director, I was like, why did you choose me? I just, because it was at, this is before the pandemic when we could all hang out, and we'd have like a end of term drinking party and all that stuff. And I just asked a blunt question, why did you hire me? And they're like, well, we were trying to think, like, are you someone that we could have a drink with? Could we hang out with you? So they're like, yeah, we could see hanging out with you, and you're a friendly person. So there you go. And I was like, you didn't even look at my CV? No, I'm sure they did, but
no, they did. It's just like, you were just as good as the really, really good guy. And it just boiled down to the fact, yeah, but he looks better with the beer in his hand. So that's just a couple of things to mention from Glenn. And I'll read them out for you. Glenn says, dating or going back to the point about visa status, Glenn says, marital status is also important because you can get some supplementary pay. Teate. It's in Romaji. And on the point about Japanese CVs, Glenn says, I have to disagree. Even part-time people should have a resume ready in Japanese. A few I applied for required only that.
Oh, nice.
Just he wanted to remind you that if you're going to wear a suit, please wear your pants for Zoom meetings. Thank you, Glenn. I often forget to wear my pants, and you can't even tell right now whether I did or I didn't. Now, let's say you get hired, and it's your very first part-time university experience, and you're feeling up to it. You've got your master's degree. You're good with Zoom. You did the ed tech thing, but what do you find with new hires? And when I just said not just new hires, but like rookies in the classroom at university, what would be sort of like as the grizzled old veterans that we are, if you were to give them your advice, this is what you're going to find different about teaching university, specifically in Japan at a big university.
Well, as far as like being in the interview is concerned, and it's someone who, I guess this is the weird part that I should talk about, Jose, is that a lot of these places will say you must have at least 1 year of experience. Where it's like, okay, how do you get this 1 year of experience?
That's right. Wait, we can't hire you. You don't have experience. Wait.
Yeah. So you have to have that in hand. And gosh, I've never interviewed someone who doesn't have at least 1 year of experience. So it's very strange to have that. So that's where it comes back to having a mentor, having someone that that you can get to know, and like find that person who's maybe a director of a program. They'll kind of bring you on and say, okay, I trust this person. I've talked to them. I'm going to give you an interview. Okay. So it's incredibly important, first of all, to get that, that person that Now, once they let you in the door and they say, okay, well, we're going to give you a chance, John. Cause like I didn't have experience at the time of teaching in a university, but they do say, oh, you should have at least 1 year of experience. Be, I guess, as confident as possible and as flexible as possible. And when I say that, have in hand or be ready with your own teaching materials. Let them know that you're comfortable creating your own materials, as well as working from a set syllabus or a set curriculum that someone has put together, and you can follow a workbook properly without like just going off piece. So let them know that you're flexible and you're willing to listen, and that nobody's perfect. I should also say this, Jose, is that it's almost impossible to find an ideal candidate. There might be someone who's really good at academic writing, but can't really teach in a classroom. There's going to be people who are awesome at teaching in a classroom, but their Japanese is terrible.
Oh,
and I would have to say I have my faults as well. I love teaching in a classroom. I love being in the classroom. I didn't mind teaching on Zoom, but my Japanese, I'd have to say my listening ability is good, but my Japanese speaking ability is pretty low. So there's, everybody's got their faults, but let the director know, like, hey, I'm going to do my best. Don't worry about that. I'm going to be flexible and just go in there. If you have questions, make sure that you have someone that you can send a message to and ask them that question, and not really, I would say, don't really bombard them with just millions and millions of questions about how do you log onto the LMS? How do you do this? How do you do that? Because you might annoy them. But I would say that for someone who's just getting into it, I think that having an open mind and just being flexible is probably the most important thing. And it's not really much, I would say it's not much different from teaching high school students, if you've ever taught in a high school, because you're getting a lot of times these first year core English classes, and these students are fresh out of high school. So it's not that much different. But when you get into teaching maybe electives with third and fourth year students, it could be a lot different there.
Couple of points just came through on Facebook. One from Bjorn, who just entered the room. Thank you, Bjorn. Okay. Good to see you here. He says in Facebook, on the CV, if applicable, because we were talking about materials before, list some of the material that you might have created, like your worksheets or
very good point,
audio transcripts, whatever, even if it was only used in the school you worked. And something that was in the chat, Glenn mentions, I just met someone who got hired to the uni with only JET program experience. So it doesn't have to be uni experience. And just thinking about that as you were speaking, Jon, I think a lot of what you're saying is really, really relevant and important information. But I get the feeling that out here towards, the other 46 prefectures, that there's a different set of supply and demand forces that are working. And I think out here, for example, the one thing that you were saying about Japanese, I think the Japanese might be a bit more relevant out here because there are literally fewer professors that can actually speak English well enough. The majority of professors in a proper university who are on the English faculty will be able to understand anyone who speaks English, but it's not going to be like it is in Tokyo, I think. And that kind of thing is maybe what Glenn might be pointing to when he says, well, jets get in, Japanese stuff is important too. Oh, and for everyone else, Jon and I are just going to work through a lot of the questions that we've sort of scheduled for the evening. And once we're done that, then we'll open up the microphones and the cameras for everyone to be able to join in the conversation too. So if you've got some points that you want to hang on to and bring them to Jon a little bit later, I welcome you to do that. However, Bjorn did just put up, in March, all the requirements get lowered if universities all of a sudden need a teacher. Yeah, emergency.
Very, very good point right there. Yes, absolutely. And a lot of times people get shuffled around. People who are part-time teachers, they get offered a full-time position, usually sometimes at the last minute. And some full-time teachers become faculty members. So those kind of positions open up. So absolutely, Bjorn, that's a very good point, that you might get that last minute hire.
Yep.
And I remember my first year working in a uni, I got, I think like 2 or 3 coma at the time. And I was kind of like, should I quit my my high school job? I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if I wanted to take that leap. And when I talked to my mentor, he said, just do it. Just you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just do it. And then I was like, okay, fine. I jumped in there. It's only 3 coma. And then the school was opening up another department. And it was like, boom, all of a sudden I had 8 coma, like within a week. So there you will get those emergency hires, and people come and go. And then as long as you're in that university and they vetted you and you're doing a good job, the following year, you will likely get offered more work. So that's also something to keep in mind.
When you came to Japan and started working part-time, that was what, 2009, 2008 in university, part-time in university?
Oh, so when I first came to Japan in 2000, I want to say 2007, 2008. I'd have to look at it. Yeah, so I was here. I was working at started at Eikaiwa for a couple of years, and then that moved into high school, junior high school, until about 2013. I think the end of 2013 is when I really started looking into master's programs.
Okay. And so when did you start doing uni work?
2015. So that would have been April 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
In those ensuing 8 years, what do you think has, especially now, looking at it from your position as a coordinator of sorts, what do you think has changed over the 8 years that you've been working as a university instructor and then to become a university part-time coordinator? What's changed in the environment for part-time?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would have to say that honestly, Jose, I would say that in the last at least 3 years, ever since the pandemic, the pool of candidates has gotten smaller, because people who were thinking about coming to Japan, like maybe as a jet or an ALT, whatever, people that were thinking about coming here, of course, they were blocked. Like you couldn't even come into the country. So the people that maybe have husbands or wives, houses and things like that, and you can't really leave, it's like, I've got this job right here. I started to see that a lot of times we had the same people that were applying for these jobs. So the pool has gotten smaller. But now that the country's opened up, I'm sure that when we start hiring for any part-time university teachers, I'm sure that we're going to start to see some new faces. So that was the biggest change, is that um, I guess the candidates were, gosh, I don't want to say worse, but
That's okay. Say it.
I don't want to be mean.
No, I'm just
I don't
kidding.
want to be mean. But the people that I currently work with are awesome, by the way. It's like the ones that did come into the program that we vetted and everything like that. It's really great to work with them and things like that. So but really, yeah, that's kind of the big one here, is I think the pandemic really shook things up. That's the major thing that's changed.
Have you seen any changes in the quality of the students themselves?
Well, I would have to say that the program that I'm working in, it was saying like, okay, we're gonna have only the best of the best in as far as English speakers are concerned, and it's this international business program. And over time, we've had to lower our standards, and now the curriculum has changed. It's come up at 4 years now, and the curriculum is changing, and now we have to let in these students who are not exactly proficient English speakers, and we've got to scramble to get them up to speed and get their CEFR levels up, and that's going to happen this April. So yeah, I would have to say that we've had to lower our standards a bit in order to get the number of students into the program here. So at least in my school, I can't really speak for, where you work in Fukuoka or anything like that.
Right. Glenn asks, what about the percentage of males or females as potential teachers? I guess he's asking as a dynamic thing, that 8 years, the ratio between female and male teachers. Have you seen any changes that way? Maybe that's what Glenn wants to ask.
Right, right. Well, we do try to go for a good balance, but I would say for the most part, we get a lot of male teachers applying for the positions. And I would say almost 80-20. It's pretty difficult to get a good balance, but when I'd say for the program that we have right now, it's definitely not 50-50. We tried to shoot for that, but it's like, if you can't get the right candidates in, I mean, you have to hire who can fit those positions.
If the working population that you hire from is literally, 4-1,
right,
you're actually skewing the entire process to try to make it 1-1, and you're actually disadvantaging, if that's a word, one particular group to hire more from another group, even though there's actually less of that group than there is of the other group. So
right.
when the actual group is 80% males, then it's not surprising that it's going to be 3-1 or 4-1 to reflect the actual reality.
Absolutely.
Are you good for a little while? I think we've got a few people who might be interested in actually having you hang around for a bit and asking.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's still what, like 8:30 right now?
It's only 8:30. If you don't mind hanging around, I'm gonna
Sure.
let's see here. I'm gonna allow people to turn on their oops. That's got stuck down to the bottom of the screen. So I'm gonna allow people to turn on their videos. I'm gonna allow people to unmute themselves. So if you guys have a question, if you want to join into the conversation, hey Glenn, then please feel free to do so. Jon, what is your job actually, without getting into names or anything like that? What do you do at the university that you work at?
Well, I mentioned earlier, my job title is the specially appointed assistant professor. And so I run, it's called the Academic Support Center, and that's for students in my program who might need extra help outside of class and things like that. It's almost like open office hours for students. And so I teach 3 COMA in the classroom, and then I've got basically 6 COMA or 6 hours in the support center. So I have to do that. And then I also have, I've got to help hire the part-time teaching staff. And then we've got an academic English program where one part is for academic writing, and then the other part is for academic speaking and listening. And so I handle the speaking and listening part. So I mainly work with all the teachers who are involved with that, but of course I'll have lunch with anybody. I love kind of hanging out with all the part-timers. I understand, you've got to realize, though, Jose and everybody else in here, that I think that the part-timers are the most undervalued people in the university. And I say that because they're often overlooked, and there's the full-time faculty members who I know they are very busy with all the meetings, and they have to set up the curriculum and everything like that, and they've got to do their research, that there are actually people that have to implement that curriculum, and that's where the part-timers come in. And I don't think the part-timers are given really enough credit a lot of times. And so I like to, at least when I can, I like to have lunch with as many of the part-timers as possible and not talk about work stuff. I love hearing about, people's 40K bike ride, and they're training for a marathon, and they're buying a Besso, and out in the boonies, and the process they're going through. I'd love finding out what people are, what makes them tick. So
not just psychological or social, which is actually, as you say, very, very important, but in terms of the workplace environment, what do you find is spent, how much of your time, or what part of your day is spent on what, in terms of supporting your staff? Or is your day mostly spent on supporting the students and not so much the staff?
It's a pretty balanced, I'd say, approach to it here. So once I'm done with my class, like I said, I've only got 3 coma throughout the week. And once I'm done with my class, it's open for any students to come in, and they can either book a time to come talk to me, or I might get an email from a teacher saying like, hey, this came up with the internet, for example, like, how do you get on here? And if I'm on campus, I'll say, hold on just one second, I'll pop into your classroom and help out. So I would say it's probably 50-50 of being able to help out with the teachers. There might be, it's pretty rare to get a problem with any student. But there was a problem with the international students. This one teacher was talking about how they couldn't control some of the students in class. So I just kind of popped in there, took some notes, was like, hey, of course I'm not knocking the teacher in any way, but I was saying, hey, this is how I'd probably handle this. And let me kind of help you out with this one. If the problem persists, we'll take this up a notch to the director. If you think you can handle it in the classroom, let's go ahead and do it like that. So I really do try to balance that one out, so that I'm helping out the teachers, the students, but then also helping out my students as well that I'm teaching.
And for Bjorn or Glenn, if you want to raise your hand, or in this case, it's a very small number in the room. If you just want to unmute your mic and chime in, you're quite welcome to do. So there isn't a lot of stuff like in terms of pedagogy that you have to find supporting the teachers. More mundane stuff like, hey, what's the IP address for this room? That's the sort of thing that you mostly find yourself doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, because a lot of times we've got a brand new building as well, so there are a lot of things that come up that you wouldn't expect would come up. And so, a lot of the technical issues and things like that. But as far as like actually teaching, that was why, that's why we vetted these teachers to come in. We made sure that they checked those boxes that we were looking for in the interviews. It's like, this is someone that I could see working with. I can trust this person in the classroom. So and of course, in that interview, we asked them to explain their approach to teaching and say, okay, if you're teaching an academic writing class, tell us about your approach to that class. Or if you're teaching a speaking and listening class, tell me about some of the activities you would do. So we completely trust our teachers. And honestly, Jose, I don't like to micromanage people. I think it actually, I don't know, it almost like undermines them in a sense. And I just get the feeling that teachers that are being micromanaged, they feel like okay, what's the deal? Like you hired me, but you don't trust me to be in the classroom. So I really like to have a hands-off approach with a lot of the
On
teachers
that
that I work with.
topic,
Yeah,
do
go
you
ahead,
ever do
Bjorn.
any teacher observations?
I do, yeah. Like I said, I'll come in, and especially if I get questions from some of the new teachers, um, if they have problems with their students, I'll come in and just stand in the back of the classroom. I won't stand there for an entire 100 minutes though. And of course we get so Bjorn, we'll get our feedback from the enquete at the end of the year, the class surveys, and that's the chance for the students to really speak up. And so you can really see if the teachers are having trouble with the students at that point. And
You don't have a policy of always observing new hires?
no, I'll pop in between classes though, with especially with the new hires, and just say, hey, how are things going? Is there any questions that you have, like, anything about the textbooks that we're using? And just kind of get some feedback from them, and then let them know that, hey, my door is open. If in case you have any questions at all, email me. I'm on campus. I can pop in if you do have any questions. So yeah, I'd honestly, Bjorn, I don't really feel like it's necessary to go in and do kind of teacher observations, unless there's like a huge problem, which that hasn't come up yet in my 4 years.
Well, I just found that the teachers, myself including, we're not quite used to teaching face to face again.
Okay.
So, and a lot of teachers were hesitant how to deal, like the classroom management, the physical management of the students, how to move them around. They kind of got out of the habit because they've been using Zoom and they weren't sure what was allowed.
Yeah,
And we had a few teachers who we hired during the pandemic, and we never actually met them. So, and it was a little bit awkward doing the teacher observations in the past years. So I just wonder if you had any advice about that.
Okay, so you're asking about going from the shift from being online to actually being in the classroom, and just getting your teachers adjusted to.
Well, for instance, we had a teacher who had been teaching with us for over 2 years, but he was hired in 2020.
Sure.
And he's never had lunch with any of us, right? For 2 years. We never had that chit chat. We never popped in. We never talked a little bit. Right. And then all of a sudden there were certain things that he was doing in the classroom that we might not think is ideal in the program.
Good point. Yeah. So I guess during the pandemic, I would be here at my desk, and I would actually check in with, I would send a newsletter every Friday to all the teachers. I'm saying, hey, like, if you have any questions about this, how things are going to run once we get back into the classroom. There was, protocols of, the students were supposed to be social distancing, and once everybody got into the classroom, it was out the window.
So I think that some teachers actually, they didn't want to teach the class that way, but they had read those newsletters and they thought, okay, these are the rules. And I would just ask, but it's not working, is it? So what would you do if you had no restrictions? And they would just go back. And it was kind of difficult. But all the issues I had this year was experienced teachers who got out of the habit of, or weren't sure what was allowed or not allowed. So I was wondering, what's the best way, in your opinion, to do teacher observations if you do them in a more formal way?
Right. Well, I would never want to just pop in on a teacher.
No.
I think that's just really strange. It disrupts the whole dynamics of the classroom and everything. So I would, of course, talk to them first and just say, hey, I just want to see how your class is going. I'm going to stand in the back, just teach exactly how you would. And I did that for one of our teachers, and that was because they were having some trouble with students that were they weren't even bothering trying to speak in English, and just sitting there hanging out with their buddies speaking in their native language. And so I just sat in the back, and I had my iPad, just kind of taking notes. And it's like at the end, I'll say, hey, I'll talk with you outside of class. And so I don't want to make the students think that, oh, the teacher doesn't know what he's doing, someone else is coming in to try and override what they're doing, something like that. So I don't want to ever make the teacher feel like he or she is not in charge of the class here. So I'd always, if I did do an observation, keep myself, you know, as far back as possible in the back of the classroom, and then talk to the teacher outside, you know, and then try and work from there. And it's like, okay, have we solved whatever problem was going on? We solved this issue, and if not, what can we do to correct that issue? So
Before we get to Glenn's question, just a real ego boost for you, maybe, John. Chiyuki Yanase chimes in on the Facebook
Yuki,
and
I don't
says,
see her in the Zoom room.
so
but yeah.
she's not here. She's in the Facebook live stream. She's
Oh, okay.
commenting there, and she says, John is one of the best coordinators at the uni I currently work at. We are so lucky to have him. John, we love you! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yuki, stop it. No.
Okay, Glenn, what did you want to ask?
Well, it was more like a statement, not a question. John mentioned the end of the semester surveys from the students, and I only know the ones that were at the university where I worked. You couldn't really rely on them very much because they were all made by the university. And students just ticked off the boxes and let it go at that. I mean, I got the same evaluations year after year. So did everybody else. So just a little point there. I made my own evaluations to get information I wanted. But before that point came up, I wanted to mention that I've just become a part-timer last year after 16 years of being tenured, and it's a whole new world. And one point of advice I'd give anybody is don't just advertise yourself on places like, say, a chapter Facebook page. Talk to people individually. Not everybody's going to know that you're looking, and get back to them after maybe 2-3 months and tell them if you're still available, because they may not know. That's all.
That's a very good point.
Your hiring season, John, are you constantly looking for new people if you know that someone's about to leave in September, or if someone's about to leave in February or so?
Usually if someone's about to leave, they'll spring it on us at the last minute. So
Okay.
no, I shouldn't say that. It's happened before, but as far as the hiring season is concerned, there's usually from April to July-ish. If you're looking on, I should probably throw this in the chat here, but it's JREC, J Resin. Let me throw this one in here. I think this one might be for Kanto region. Oh crap. That one's probably too long, but it's called the JRECON portal. I'll put this one in the chat. This is where we post all of our jobs. Now, this is not the only one, but if you're really looking for a part-time job or even a full-time job, this is where you'd want to look first. And you can really narrow it down to the region where you're thinking about working. If you want to just throw the whole net out into Japan, you're going to find a lot of open job openings here throughout the year. But in general, it's going to be around April to July, and then it's going to die down once the summertime comes up, and then it comes up again. I want to say maybe like the end of September until November. That's going to be when some people are starting to leave, or maybe they've gotten different jobs, and then they're going to tell their faculty that, okay, I'm going to leave in April. So then they've got to do, we've got to go through some hiring sometimes in the fall. But, you know, in general, it would come around April. And then like I'd say, gosh, even last summer when I was in the States, I had to do a couple Zoom calls and kind of go through different resumes and things like that. And that was at the end of July, beginning of August, around that time. So, but yeah, it'll come up year round. And I think someone in the comments even put down, I think it was Bjorn, you said in March, you're going to get people that leave in the middle of, like, they'll get a job and they'll say, oh, I got to go, sorry. And it's an emergency hire. So you're a lot.
I think
time, though, is in the fall.
Yeah,
for the
Yeah.
next spring.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would start in April, but the hiring would, the process would begin in the fall.
I think it depends on what kind of job. Like if you're looking for a tenured professor, that might be sometimes almost a year in advance.
Yes.
So it will be spring. If you're looking
Sometimes,
for
yeah.
a contract full-time position, that would be late spring, summer, and then some universities do later. We're quite early. We always look. We usually have the interviews in September for those. But in September, we make the rough draft of the schedule, and that's where the part-time, if we know that someone wants to have less classes or they're leaving, so that's when we start looking. And as you mentioned before, John, that you said there was less people around. In the last 2 years, it's been really difficult to find part-timers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's opening up. I mean, I was in the city today, and just walking around like the Harajuku area with my wife, and just foreigners everywhere. So it's like it's definitely opening back up. I know that people are going to start coming back in, and we'll start to see the JET people who maybe decided to go back to school and get their master's degree. They're going to start coming in. We'll start to see that the pool will start to open up here in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
But I mean, the JETs or the Eikawa teachers, they get the first experience, and by the time they are university ready, that might be 5 years from now.
That's true.
So I think it will still be quite difficult the next 2-3 years. So if Glenn, like if you're looking for more part-time job, now is the chance. Hit everyone up.
Right.
Well, I got very lucky, and this will be an additional tip. When I retired and I was looking from the October, November range, I didn't find anything, not at all. And I finally got something in February and March. 3 different universities took me on, and 2 of those were under emergency situations, but they were only for spring. So you just keep telling people that you're available. And lo and behold, one of those universities now has asked me to continue for the spring. And the other one has tripled the number of classes they're going to give me for this coming spring.
That's a really good point, Glenn. And usually at least for my university, they'll give someone maybe 2 or 3 COMA, like 2 or 3 classes the first year or the first even semester. And then sometimes somebody will leave. And then all of a sudden, as long as you prove yourself, that's going to open you up wide open. As long as you can say like, yes, I can handle these classes. It's no problem. The students like me, the staff likes me. We're willing to give you, I think we're limiting them to, I want to say 8 COMA. So 4 and 4. So two full days. And it used to be, there were some teachers that were getting 9, 10, 11, even 12 COMA throughout the week. So, and also real quick, Jose, you mentioned your age, and you're like, oh, why would I go back and get my master's degree? Well, my uni, right now it cuts off at age 70. So it's like, you got plenty of time, man.
I wouldn't. Thanks. I wanted to also ask about, apart from the sort of shrinking pool of potential part-time instructors and the sort of what we may have observed as the sliding quality of our student body, what other sort of trends do you see, or what patterns are you observing in terms of what you think you can predict for the future for part-time university work? Or are you seeing anything else that's sort of coming down the pipe as for example, I don't know if you want to bring it all the way to things like artificial intelligence. I don't even want to get into that conversation. But David,
we just brought Dave in here to talk about artificial intelligence. There he is.
Just brought Dave in here to talk about.
Dave, you did it again.
I think I fixed it.
Yeah. Okay. But John, so do you see any of those trends, or any trends that you think you observe?
That's a very interesting question, and it's perfect timing for Dave to walk into the classroom or to the Zoom room here, because I was actually going to say, like the elephant in the room is the whole like Chat GPT and like the Bing Edge developer kind of thing. That's going to be the huge thing that I see being an absolute game changer starting from, you know, April. And that's not just with our students using it, but also with teachers using it to create new content and things like that. And I think that that's a whole nother OTJ
Yeah.
session that we could have, that I could get into with you, and something I could talk about for a whole nother hour and a half as well.
Well, if we're already here, and it'll keep me from forgetting before I let everybody go, that is the next OTJ TV episode.
Awesome.
It'll be March 25th. It'll be with an expert that was introduced to me by Jeffrey Cross. And this is Dr. David Joyner, who unfortunately, I don't have a photograph of him yet to show on a PR card, but he's out of Georgia Tech. And he's an expert on educational technology and artificial intelligence. So he's actually going to come and speak on OTJ TV, mostly about artificial intelligence and Chat GPT, but also about educational technology in general. But
Awesome.
yeah, okay, so go on, John. So you know, AI is going to be big in the classrooms.
Yeah, that's a big one here. I was actually trying to find the live event, but seeing if there's other comments that are coming in, but
not at this point.
I don't know. Yeah. But that's going to be like the big, like I said, it's the elephant in the room right now. It's like everyone's talking about AI and how that's going to change how we're teaching, and the fact that, you know, Bjorn, I don't think he's in here anymore, but how all of a sudden Japan has opened up again. So now it's like we can even get the teachers who might even have master's degrees, and they might have the experience that they went back home for a few years and like, hey, I think I might go back to Japan now. So I think we'll start to see the pool of part-timers opening up, and yeah.
Okay. Glenn.
Yeah, there's a couple of quick additional points about job hunting. One is that JREC Insight, which is in the chat here, and which everybody uses, I think. It's in both languages, but the jobs may not be. You may find a posting only in the Japanese site. So heads up on that. And second thing is, especially when you get closer and closer to April 1st, the universities are pretty much fixed on the day and time that they might have open class needs. So develop a thick skin for that sort of thing. Your Wednesday afternoon at 3 might not be open, but that may be where the potential employer wants you. So don't be too discouraged. It's going to happen.
I have a question in the Facebook thread, John.
Okay.
So Amy actually asked Carmen, because Carmen was the one that posted a follow-up link in the Facebook thread about the universities that you recommended. And Amy asks, are the degrees internationally accredited? Are there degrees recognized in countries like Japan? So those two universities, the really reasonable one at $9,500 and the other one that you mentioned before, those degrees will be recognized by universities like yours, right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same way that, like I said, my degree from American College of Education, it's accredited by the same place that accredited Purdue University, which is a Big Ten school. And yeah, so absolutely. As long as, you can even check, you can go and check the school's accreditation and then go to the actual, the company that's accrediting that school and find a list of all those schools that it's doing it for. So yeah, that being said, I don't know, I can't speak for the governors. I think it's Governor State University. I'm pretty sure it is. But yes, that's I think that's actually a really good point though, Amy, because there are some universities, I'm sure, that will not be accredited, but then they'll try and say, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal, it'll still work for you. So be careful. Be careful. Do your homework on that one. Definitely make sure that you're going to be okay with that.
But the two that you were recommending are cool, right? They're no problem. I mean,
I should say the one that I'm recommending, which is American College of Education, is it's gotten me my jobs.
yeah, there you go. There you go. And at $9,500 American, hard to go wrong at that point. Dave.
Yeah, this is a great conversation for an old guy like myself who's not thinking about the future so much like I was 14, 15, 16 years ago. But here's a kind of a question I have for you. That somebody who's starting out now, they got sort of that, let's say they're 35 years old or 38 years old, and they're thinking, I want to stay here, I want to make a career here. The two things I guess that come to my mind would be following all the steps you talked about tonight. Get the master's, get some papers done, make sure you're out in the community networking. But will there be jobs here for a full career, say from 38 to 65 years old, with the shrinking population, for example, with less and less children and universities potentially closing? And then you mentioned, when I sort of turned the camera on, with the unknown, the elephant in the room, with AI and artificial intelligence and things like ChatGPT, we don't know the future, but will jobs be more and more difficult to get? I guess that would be my question for you to predict on or to muse on.
That
for a younger person,
that is the
who thinks,
right here.
who wants a 25-year career,
Absolutely. That is the question right here, Dave. And I think that at least for my university, it's opened up a new program. It's an international program. So they're saying, okay, we've got a shrinking population. So if they open up an international program, they can bring in students from China and Korea and all over Europe and the United States and Canada. So I think that a lot of unis are going in that direction. And of course that would keep a need for keeping teachers like us around, I would suppose. Now, as far as your question or your comment about like ChatGPT and the potential for AI, I guess, replacing us, I don't want to say that it won't happen, okay? But I do want to say that it could potentially revolutionize, right? It will revolutionize the way that we're going to teach in the classroom over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even. And we're going to start to see that, Dave, in April. We're going to start to see this is going to start to really come into play here.
I've been approached by a few people to talk about like I'm an expert or something, right? But like I guess just because of the privilege of being at the front row of OTJ, I've already spoken about it at one university and possibly be doing that at our orientation. I'm not sure yet.
Awesome. Very cool.
But I think, I'm on the side of, like, it's a tool that you should familiarize yourself with as soon as possible. And certainly, we're seeing the bus coming, so you don't want to get caught. You know it's coming, so you should be prepared to use the tool. You should be prepared to know how students might use it in good ways and in not good ways. And we're at the front row of this. We're not even at the front row. We're in it. Right? It's happening right before our eyes. And so, I said to a coworker the other day, I feel privileged in two ways. One is and Jose and I have done a lot of work together with OTJ, is that we were at the forefront of online teaching in Japan. I feel very privileged about that, and was able to, at a late age in my career, kind of switch modes. And I see that happening again. Like only 2 years later, right? It's like, whoa, we got something else to.
Absolutely.
We thought online learning was something. I think this is.
Well, full disclosure, I work also part-time with Dave at our university in Tokyo, and gosh, we talked about this extensively at the lunchroom table. And I remember even, I want to say like 2 years ago, I gave like a short presentation about like, hey, we've got this coming wave of AI coming
Mm.
up. Like start learning how to do basic programming and things like that. Start learning R programming, get yourself familiarized with Python. And you know, this is coming up. And then all of a sudden it's like, what was it, October, November, something like that, Dave.
Yep.
And then we started talking about, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this program can actually type our students essays for us. It just is like, okay, this is going to be a huge game changer. All right. So it's
So,
going to
yeah,
be something, if you're talking
I
about
think
getting
just keeping
hired.
employed, getting employed, keeping employed, and making a career, I guess, is the, is a challenge, right?
Well, yeah, I would say also in your interview, if you're trying to get hired, let the person that's potentially going to hire you know you're familiar with this kind of stuff. You're ahead of the, you're up with what's going on. You're not just saying like, okay, well, I'm set in my ways with only teaching out of a textbook. It's like, this stuff's going to change very quickly here.
Glenn.
Yeah.
Just wondering if John's in his position's got anything he might want to say about advice for women who want to be teachers. I mean, we've only got one in the Zoom room here, but
Right.
because they're hired at a lower percentage than the male teachers, despite the fact that that's changing a little, how can they or what can they do to make it a little more advantageous for themselves?
Gosh, that's a good question there, Glenn. And the fact that I think we've got someone like Chiyuki in the chat. She's an awesome teacher. Like, by the way, we need more people that are, outgoing, and it's one of those things that there's really, it's a matter of checking the boxes that I said: master's degree, publications, conferences, speaking at any kind of conferences, checking those boxes and getting into the interview. So I would never say that I'm going to hire Dave over Chiyuki because I know Dave. I would just say that for women that are trying to get into positions here, make sure that you put make sure you get all those boxes checked. And
well, if you don't mind me cutting in,
mm-hmm.
At my old university, they decided to replace 3 of us who were leaving, all with 3 female teachers. So immediately there was competition right there for who's going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the 20% at your university who get hired, how can a female potential teacher make herself look better than the other females?
Oh, wow.
Because that's happening. They're beginning to hire a lot more of the women nowadays to fill quotas from the government.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that, and honestly, I kind of wish that our program was a little bit more balanced, to tell you the truth. So in order to, gosh, I mean, we just don't get that many candidates we don't get as many female candidates whenever a job opens it up. And it's not that we're specifically looking for male or female. It's just that we get, even in the last round of hiring in July and August, I think it was 100% male candidates. We didn't even have a single, we might have had one, but it was someone that didn't even live in Japan. So it's like, okay, that we can't possibly hire this person.
Well, if you don't mind, maybe I should turn it around. How can the universities make themselves look more open to having women even applying? Like you say, if you've only got a population of males applying, but there are women out there.
Mm-hmm.
If they look at a university and say, it's a good place, but gee, they've only got a bunch of guys, I don't even want to apply there.
Well,
how can the university change itself?
I think that in the JRESN site, if you say that you're specifically looking for male or specifically looking for female, I don't know if that's actually legal to do that.
I don't think that's legal.
Right.
but some of them are getting by with that for
Really?
specific
Okay.
reasons that are legal. So
Okay.
it's usually the quota thing. They need to have a certain percentage, and if the university, like my old one, says we don't have enough, they get by with it.
Right. Okay. Dave.
I wonder, on a similar vein, I wonder if it's difficult for women to make themselves available for the kind of time schedule that most universities run with, which are, you know, Monday to Friday, mornings, afternoons, if they're, say, raising children, if they have other things that they have to do. That
You
brings-
presume that they're all with children, Dave? Come
Was
on
it-
now.
Well, but
Well,
bringing that back to anybody who, like, I notice, and I know in our own workplace, like making your schedule as available as possible, whether you're male or female, to the coordinators of the program, will get you work if you want it. The more open you are with your schedule, the more you can be, I don't know what the word is, but it's just
viable.
availability is huge, and how you make yourself available. Whether, I don't know if there's a difference between how men and women do that, but just, applying for the jobs would seem to be number one. But number two is making.
That's the big one right there. Make sure you throw your hat in the ring.
Yeah, go and fill out some application forms.
Yeah,
sorry, Dave, go.
Yeah, no, I mean that's back in the day when I got work at university. My first university was a shoo-in because I was teaching at the elementary school, and they wanted me straight in the education department. Everything outside of that was connections. And last minute, like John said earlier, like, well, it's March and somebody needed somebody. It was through people. I was nervous as anybody trying to go to job interviews and stuff and trying to get jobs. I was afraid, but it was putting yourself forward. It's huge, whether you're a male or female. You really got to step up to the, you got to be hungry if you want to work. It's good money out there in the university world, and
I would also,
by the way, sorry to cut you off here real quick, Jose. The
John.
director of our program is she's a female, so it's she's definitely open to balancing out the program as well. So it's a matter of really, don't be shy about sending out your resume. Like it's something that you should definitely be going into these JOLT conferences and letting people know that you're looking for work and you're available, you're ready to go. Just like Dave said, talking to people.
I would give as general advice either to a woman or a man who's looking, as Dave was saying, you're in your early 30s and you're looking, you're inspired by this conversation we're having. You think, I'm going to make the next step to university work. I just came back from giving a talk to the ALTs in Miyazaki. And at the end of the talk, I was approached by one of the ALTs and said, you're doing what I want to do. You work at a university, so can you give me some advice on how to do that sort of thing? And I gave her basically the same advice you did, John. It's like, get your MA, your MED or whatever, get your networking done, and get your 3 publications done. And she said, oh yeah, publications, never thought of that. But what about presentations? I asked. And she said, presentations? Oh, I don't know. I've never done a presentation. I don't know about that. And I said, well, just begin by thinking about what you would actually talk about. If you start thinking, oh, I have to go give a presentation, but you don't actually begin thinking about what is it that I can actually present and what are the steps I can take before I go and start trying to do something at JASIT or the JOLT National Conference, I think, you're missing some scaffolding that might be available to you. And one of them is, first, think about just going to do JOLT chapter presentations after you become a JOLT member. A chapter presentation is much easier to actually get an available slot for. And if you want to think about something before that, think about just taking advantage of doing a MyShare. If a MyShare appears, think about what's unique about your pedagogy, and doing a good MyShare, that's where the networking really comes in. Just getting started on the idea of your first presentations and your first conferences with what do I want to talk about? What are my ideas in pedagogy? Getting that lined up, and then actually starting to, you're probably not going to write your first paper by yourself. You're probably going to write it with somebody. So get the networking done, find somebody who is a, hey, you know, I'm into fluency too, and maybe you can collaborate with them after you show that a small presentation. And that actually brings me to my last point. So when OTJ does stuff like BTG or Scooby or the summer sessions, we make it very easy for you to get a slot. If you ask us, we will provide you with a slot. It's a really easy place for people who are doing their first presentations to get their feet wet. And
What was it? The Moose?
the Moose, yeah, it's the Moose idea. Just
I think I
massive
spoke
deal.
at the Moose.
Yeah, you did, and it was really great. And
It's on my CV too.
and it should be, because you were, I know you probably had a fairly large audience, like about 15, 20 people, right? That's larger than most JOLT chapter presentations, and it's a good thing to get in there.
Yeah, and there's also a point system as well. So if you get, and I think Glenn just said he's giving advice on publishing and researching in the monthly ZPD meetings. And Glenn, I'm sure you could probably talk a little bit more about that, but there's if you are the lead writer on a publication, that's worth more than if you are the second writer or the third writer in the line here. If you get published in a book chapter, I think is worth more than a conference proceeding, of course. But of course, Glenn is going to be able to tell you a lot more about that kind of stuff. But the getting published idea is worth a lot more than speaking at a conference.
Yeah, but it is a good place to start, right?
Absolutely, yes, yes, it is.
Getting the connections. What if you wrote a whole book?
You mean on Zoom? Like about
guys like that?
Yeah.
Tell you what, I don't know. Does do a lot of people have a few other questions they want to ask Jon? I don't see anything popping up in the Facebook thread. If you want to stick around, Jon, or it's past 9, and I only we have wow, here come the comments. Okay, John Hozak in Facebook says, Jon,
I'm trying to refresh the comments. I see there's 14 comments, but I can't seem to.
The comments should just appear if you're if you click that little arrow and get it to point down. But I'll read it out for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Who is Old Fart White Knight at the bottom left? I think that's you, Dave. Shh. Whoa. Okay, I'm not gonna read that. Okay. Susan writes, super informative session tonight, especially for those of us who didn't start off in academia. Okay. There you go. So I was about to say, unless there are other comments that people want to make, like past 9, Jon, thanks very much for hanging around as long as you have. Was there anything else that you wanted to say at the very end?
Well, I was going to say that it is great to be back here. Jose and Dave, I really appreciate you, letting me come back on for OTJ. That's awesome. And gosh, I don't know if this is I don't want to do self-promotion or anything, but I did want to say that if there's something about the, the next session that's coming up, I would love to add something about like the whole chat GPT thing. But that's for a totally different topic here. So yeah.
No, the self-promotion is important. I'm actually going to give you an opportunity for the self-promotion. What are you up to? You doing any presentations? You are writing any papers that might be coming up soon?
Well, I've got actually I just finished one that was on student or teachers creating their lesson plans and things like that for using Chat GPT. So I just finished up a presentation last week with my brother for the Kanagawa Private School Association. So that was a big one for us. And, I'm hoping to turn that into a publication. So I'm, looking for that stuff. And Dave, I'm really big into personal finance. So we do have a group for people living in Japan. It's called Investing from Japan. So if you're interested in joining, please do. If you're interested in talking about personal finance, that would be awesome to have you in the group as well.
You're a busy man. And as a busy man, I very much appreciate, and I think we all very much appreciate you coming around to OTJtv. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Awesome. Jose, Dave,
Good to
Glenn,
see you, John.
Kelsey, Julian, everybody on Facebook as well. I'm trying to find the comments as well, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me. Okay.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you.
Alrighty.
Adios. Bye.
Bye.